look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leach. Today, we are lucky enough to what I call have a moderator and a keynote speaker on the program. Moderated today by Paul Stanford, and the keynote speaker is Todd McCormick. And Todd, I tell you, I want to thank you for being nice enough to take a few moments and join us here on the big broadcast.
It's my pleasure, Casper. Thank you for spending so much time on such an important subject.
And Paul, I want to thank you for being nice enough to also every Thursday be part of our family here on the big broadcast.
You're welcome, Casper. Thank you.
And today's topic we're kicking off is the evolution of cannabis in Europe and the cultural impact that it's had. And Todd, you and Paul both have a tremendous amount of input on that topic, and I thought we might open up with you.
Well, Paul and I have both been studying hemp for a very long time. We were both fortunate enough to be very close to Jack Herer and work on his seminal book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, with him. And when researching that book, it became really obvious to me that when you think back to, say, Columbus's time, when he discovered the New World, this was 300 years before the invention of the cotton gin. This was almost 400 years before the invention of this synthetic like nylon that we would go on to replace the cotton with. And when you think back to where Columbus was in 1492, much of his ship and much of everything around him, the clothing he wore, the paper he used, the ropes, the riggings, the paints, the varnishes, only came from the cannabis plant. And when you think about that, the cultural evolution of Europe is and was greatly dependent on their application of cannabis industrially. And I was asked a question yesterday, what I thought was the biggest, basically, and best breakthrough for cannabis. And I had to say it was cannabis sativa L, because when the Indo-Europeans and the Asians started using cannabis as a textile, that's when human evolution really took off. You think, Paul?
Yeah, I of course agree. You go back to prehistoric civilizations in Central Asia, and you see that cannabis is cultivated thousands of years prior to the written word. And then you look at the first text in China, in present-day India, and they both talked about hemp as being the most important crop. So it goes back, as we know, at least 12,000 years, and maybe more than 25,000 years that cannabis has been cultivated by human beings. And, you can just look at a wolf and then look at a Chihuahua or a Rottweiler and know that we've changed that species a great deal over the past 7,000 years. So cannabis and humans have co-evolved just like that, each to meet each other's needs. And so our nutritional requirements perfectly match the amino acid profile and the essential fatty acid profile of hemp seed. And of course, cannabis flowers have THC and other chemicals that mimic brain and nervous system neurotransmitters. So we've co-evolved for a long time, perhaps longer than any other two species. So we have this symbiotic relationship that continues to this day. And it's a shame that, certain economic forces starting about 100 years ago started to spread a lot of misinformation about it. I have a large collection of cannabis, antique medical marijuana containers. And what amazes me is that a lot of them, starting about 100 years ago, were marked poison. So I just wonder why, and cannabis has no lethal dose. You can take as much as you can possibly take and you're not going to die. So I just wonder why it was labeled poison 100 years ago. What do you think, Todd?
Well, I think that in the way that they use the term might be a little bit different from the way we use the term now, whereas in a sense poison was more of a toxin, and they would put it on things that were just anything that could hurt your skin, hurt your in any way. Now I think of it at the highest degree of the definition of the word, like, you can kill somebody, but I think it was more like of something that could toxify or if you used in a concentrated manner, something you should be concerned about. When we launched the museum in Barcelona, for those people listening, there is a new Barcelona museum that is dedicated to cannabis culture and hemp history. And when we launched that, Ben Dronkers, the gentleman at the museum, has a vast collection of medicinal bottles. And when you look back, I think that their use of the word poison was almost like a disclaimer, like their way of the little legal fine print. It's like, oh yeah, and by the way, there's the list of things that could happen. And I, like you, Paul, don't really see the toxicity of cannabis really that makes sense per se why they would put poison on something that's not poisonous. But I think it could have just been the companies back in the time trying to cover themselves.
Yeah, that could be it. That could be it for sure.
It's interesting in the news today. There's the news literally today is that hemp is used in over 25,000 products now, including the new BMW, the electric BMW that is getting all the news today and yesterday, has hemp in it, as does actually all the BMWs, Jaguars, Mercedes, even the Bugatti has hemp in it grown in northern Holland by the same gentleman, Ben Dronkers, that owns the hemp and marijuana museums located in both Barcelona and Amsterdam. And it's pretty amazing how he has been able to get hemp back into the commodities around him in Europe, because when the companies are looking for environmental alternatives to some of the products that they're already consuming, they are compelled under European environmental law to use products like hemp. And it's great to see these companies starting to embrace it. So now all of the more expensive lines of Mercedes and BMW, the 7 Series, the 5 Series, all the S Series, SLs have hemp in them. And it's an amazing what when you look at it, 20 years ago, none of those companies were using hemp. And I've been pressuring Ben to say, this is what has to happen in North America, because the farmers in America are being ripped off. 100 years ago, special interests came in after World War II and reorganized the way that the government did business. Everybody listening should take the time to watch a wonderful documentary called Why We Fight, because after World War II, the armament division of the military-industrial complex went crazy and basically took over our government. They waged wars all over the world, and they reorganized the way we were allowed as consumers to basically live. Because farmers, when you think about this, who had for generations since the moving of westward from the people that came here originally, as we went west, we planted hemp. All of our covered wagons were made out of canvas. When you have canvas, it was from cannabis, so all of this wild hemp growing in places like Nebraska is from the settlers. And when you look at the fact that now these same farmers are not even allowed to process the hemp growing on their property, it's a little ridiculous, because what happened is all of these big businesses after World War II came up with the synthetic solutions to hemp, helped to keep hemp outlawed, and has kept farmers basically in a stranglehold. And
I often say that, marijuana prohibition is really about fuel, fiber, money, power, and the continued centralization of economic and political control. They just made up this whole marijuana myth to, have the economic markets concentrate on petrochemical alternatives and synthetic alternatives and things that are capital intensive. So most of us can't play that game. You know, it takes tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to drill for petroleum. It takes tens of billions of dollars to process it into fuel and other products. But you can get 300 gallons of diesel fuel from an acre of hemp with the residual 30 tons of fiber and 3 tons of food. And you just take that hemp seed oil, pour it right into your diesel engine, turn the key, and you can drive around.
Back in 1916, the USDA put out Bulletin 404, which Paul is very familiar with. And what they try to emphasize is that in order to get the same amount of paper out of trees, the same amount of paper that would grow in 1 acre of hemp in 1 year's time would take 4 years of Douglas fir trees growing perpetually for 20 years to make the same amount of paper that farmers could get off of 1 acre of hemp grown in under a year. And this is when you start looking at the economic viability of hemp, you can see why I say, and Paul says, that in a sense, farmers are being ripped off right now. I mean, I love Willie Nelson. He's been a big advocate for the cause. But those guys can have as many farm aids as they want. But until they realize that it's about hemp, that those farms were built on hemp, and they weren't built on, you know, cotton. I mean, cotton didn't come along for 300 years after we started settling this country. There wasn't a patent on a cotton gin until the 1790s. Yet slavery started in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia, along with the passing of laws that said that farmers had to grow at least 10% of their land as hemp. Because what a lot of your listeners might not realize is that when Columbus arrived in this country, what he found was tobacco. What he expected to find and couldn't find was growing all over Europe and was cannabis hemp. And without it, he couldn't mend his sails, he couldn't mend his ropes, he couldn't repaint his boat, he couldn't get home. So sailors back 300-400 years ago had to set sail with barrels full of hemp seeds, because if they happened to crash somewhere that didn't have hemp, that was their main ingredient. That was their source material that they would be able to grow, be able to process, and fix their ships with. Without it, they were shipped out of luck, is basically what they were. And when these people landed in North America, what they immediately started doing was trying to plant hemp so that they could get independent of Europe. Because without hemp, we had to take all of our drug money, which was our tobacco money. We had to buy all of our blankets and our beddings and our everything cloth, everything paper, all of the ship sails, all of the ropes. We had to buy it back from Europe, which kept our country broke. So why our forefathers demanded that we grow hemp is so that we could keep that economy here. So we need it now in the 21st century as much as we needed it back in the 14, 15, 1600s.
Yeah, it's really a matter of social and economic justice because, you know, we don't need to give all of our money to the petrochemical companies. We can give it to our farmers. Instead of petrochemical companies stashing it away in their Swiss bank accounts or investing in tar sands in Saskatchewan or molybdenum.
I would like to point this out. Anybody can go online and look at photographs of Dubai 20 years ago. It was a desert, okay? You go back to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, before, you know, Zapata Oil and Bush 1 started drilling there, and it was a desert. And all of the money that we have put into the petrochemical industry could have been spread out all over North America had one simple decision been made, and that was to allow the patent from Rudolph Diesel, which developed the diesel engine to run on vegetable-based oil. His concept with the diesel engine was to fit it into the ecosystem. He believed that he could create a machine that would run off of the vegetable oils created by the plants that grew from the soil it plowed. So it fit right in. But when we started fueling our machines with these dead dinosaurs, the Saudis got rich, the Saudi Arabia got rich, Dubai grew like a weed, but our farmers went broke. And the reality is this isn't an accident. This was corporate manipulation with our capitalistic economy, allowing our farmers to go broke. Because realistically, I think the government's enjoying taking their land. I think the government didn't like homesteading in some ways, and now they're going back there. They've created an economy that the farmers cannot compete in. And now when they can't pay their taxes and they're not the ones getting rich like the guys in Dubai with the little cap on the oil well, well, they're losing their land back to the government, who's then selling it to mega corporations and parceling it out. And I think it's a manipulation of again, the capitalist system. The same government that said, go west and, multiply, and, you build a fence, you can keep the land, is now coming in and saying, sorry, we're going to create an economic situation you can't compete in, and if you don't like that, too bad, we want the land back. And I think American farmers should really start looking at this more realistically and being angry, because, like I keep saying, hemp aid can be up there on stage with all the celebrity endorsements they want, but until they start telling the truth, until they start focusing on the fact that these farms were not built on the commodities they're allowed to grow right now, that they were built on the canvas-covered wagons that went west, they were built on the rope walks of Boston, they were built on the sail manufacturing that went on everywhere, all around the country as we tried to build our nation. That's what these farms were really built on. And realistically, this is what we need now. We need to be independent of these oil sources from Saudi Arabia. I'm really glad you're spending this time, because I really think that a lot of people, especially the people that use cannabis, don't really get the significance of what the hemp history really means. I mean, I believe that Paul does when he made the joke about what prohibition is really about, is about the lucrative industrial industry, making sure that there's no competition for them. But
that was no joke. That's not a joke. That's a tragedy.
No. That's a great line right there. It's true. And it is. And that's the point that I think we're really trying to make, is that realistically cannabis prohibition or marijuana prohibition has never really been about marijuana. I really think that it was more just a racial trigger, a racial lever they could use to take it away from people that would never have allowed them to prohibit hemp or cannabis. And anybody listening to this should really take a few minutes, if they're into the history, and go back and read the transcripts from the Ways and Means Committee before they actually, the House and Means Committee, House and Ways Committee, before they actually passed what ended up being the Marijuana Tax Act, because they took 4 days of testimony. And for 3 days, they listened to a bunch of farmers and paint manufacturers and people that did not know that marijuana was this old English word hemp or cannabis, because the government had specifically used the term, like I would say it like this. Back in the 30s, if I had walked up to anybody listening to this and said, hey, they're going to make a plant called Awesome illegal, you would have looked at me and said, I've never heard of a plant called Awesome or marijuana. And if you had went and looked it up in every pharmacopoeia ever written or every encyclopedia up to that time, you would not find a plant called Awesome, as did none of the farmers find a plant called marijuana. And with that said, the government was able to then usher in legislation under the nose of so many people that didn't realize what it was. And the director, the legislative council of the American Medical Association, he went so far as to write Congress and berate them, saying that what you're doing is going to serve no good purpose whatsoever, and how far it may prove to deny people the benefits of a medicine that is yet foreseen is impossible to tell. And that was a very poignant remark, because it ended up becoming the truth, because the government prohibited what they didn't even understand at the time. When the government stepped up and prohibited what they were calling marijuana, they didn't even know what THC was. They thought that what got us high was something was called at the time the Adams 9 compound. And they didn't even know what THC was. They didn't know how safe it was. They didn't know how effective it was medicinally. They just basically listened to the social, the economic influence of these big companies and passed these laws that were not good for the people in society, but were great for big business. And marijuana laws have never been about protecting society from marijuana. Governments will let you drink till you have cirrhosis. They'll let you smoke cigarettes until you have black lung. They don't care about you. But what they care about is the economic feasibility of the people that put them in power and put them in office. There's just more crony capitalism is what we're looking at.
Well, of course, I completely agree with that. You know, there's this false dichotomy that we have. We believe that hemp and marijuana are different plants. And the fact of the matter is, they are the same plant. They're cannabis sativa. And most of the strains that I grow in my Oregon licensed medical marijuana garden are mixes of indica and sativa variety. But, what they've done is they've prohibited the plant, where they allow the low THC hemp up in Canada and Europe. While, I'm sure it's good for the car auto bodies, and we do get some nice hemp foods finally for the first time in several generations that are on the shelves at the health food store. What they've done is they've bred these plants that have virtually no THC, less than 0.3% THC. And the way they've done that is they have bred out the flowers. And by breeding out the flowers, they've bred out the THC, but also the seeds. And it's the seed that we really need. It's really about hemp seed oil and its competition with petrochemical alternatives. If we could get hemp seed oil in from high THC plants that have lots of flowers and big buds, then it'd be 20 times more productive than these low THC dwarf hemp plants that they allow in Canada and Europe. The dichotomy that they've convinced us of, that these are different plants, is false. They're really the same plant. Hemp, cannabis, marijuana, they all come from the same plant. And when we remove these artificial regulations that create this economic barrier to the full utilization of hemp fuel and fiber, then we'll see a complete reversal of this economic pyramid where the money will flow to the people instead of to a few people at the top.
Well, I'd like to interject something. I had the great privilege of pre-reading a book that I urge everybody to go out and buy. It's called Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany by Robert C. Clark and Mark Merlin. Robert Clark brought you the two books, Marijuana Botany and Hashish. And it's an interesting thing, though. One of the main points they make, Mark and Rob makes in the book, which is going to shake up the marijuana world, is that nobody smokes sativa. I'll say it again. Nobody smokes sativa. What we're referring to when we call plant sativa is really equatorial drug variety. When you think about cannabis history in the 50s and 60s, a lot of what we were smoking was coming in was from Vietnam, Thailand, Colombia, Acapulco Gold, Michoacan, Jamaican, Maui Wowie. All of this stuff we would now call sativa. None of it is. What it really is an equatorial drug variety. Because if you were to go to India, and if you look at the word indica on face value, it means of or like India. And back in the day, let's say Columbus's day, if I walked up to Paul and I handed him some seeds, he would have two questions for me. One question would be sativa, which meant, is it the cannabis sativa, which is a Latin suffix, which basically means so widely or most useful? Or is it indica, he would ask me, because that means, is it of or like India? Because even back in the day, Columbus was trying to get to India because he wanted a quicker path to the spices. Cannabis was no question one of the highly most traded spices. And indica, grown near Goa, which is a very tropical southern tip of India, is very much indica. But it looks like and smokes like, it smells like what we call sativa, because what it really is a tropical southern variety of plants found in India that were cultivated and bred for drug variety. Now, as you get into northern India and places like the Himalayas, you get a dual-use plant. You get plants that, to this day, are turned into hashish, but then are also turned into the clothing and the fabrics and to some of the things that the necessities that are used by the locals in an industrial way. And, the metaphor Paul was making earlier about Dobermans and Chihuahuas, I made years ago on Politically Incorrect, because I was being berated about marijuana use and hemp and medical, and I said, look, we all have seen dogs, okay? We know what a dog is. Cannabis is like a dog. There's a big difference between a Great Dane and a Chihuahua, and still a dog. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about cannabis hemp. There are so many different varieties of cannabis, actually, that do have low THC for sure. But there are other varieties that have higher THC and have still been used traditionally as a dual-use industrial and drug plant in the Hindu Kush Mountains, in places like Nepal and Malaya, all through India. And such. And it's going to be, I think, hard for people that are used to the word sativa to get away from it. But literally what people meant when they said sativa in Europe was the Indo-European hemp variety. The question, what sativa was, is can I turn it into rope? Can I turn it into paints and varnishes? Can I turn it into fabrics and paper and things I need every day? Or is it indica? Is it going to get me high? Humans have taken cannabis everywhere all over the world. And when you look at the natural path that cannabis has taken, humans have been the one taking it with them. I was in a conversation with Maxine, and I was asking the congresswoman basically when the Congress was going to give hemp back to the American farmers. And she looked at me rather perplexed when I said, give it back. And I said, yeah, re-legalize. And she said, re-legalize? I said, Maxine, I ask you this. You allow, as a congresswoman, the DEA to run around and destroy hemp because it's not indigenous to the North American continent. So my question to you is, where did it come from? And sadly, she, a 25-year congresswoman with very much a college degree, couldn't answer that simple question. And I actually was blown away at that and said, Maxine, rumor has it you're black. You should know a thing or two about your history. And realistically, don't you know that the same laws on slavery were started at the same time with mandatory cultivation laws of cannabis? And her jaw dropped. And this is the problem I have, is that if people that are sitting in Congress that are elected representatives who are voting on these laws are so ignorant of their own history that they're allowing corporations to sway their decisions without even looking into the past, without even actually doing the due diligence in their homework, we as society are really screwed. And we have to stand up and start demanding more from these people because, I let her know that while I've been a fan of much of her liberal, we'll say, policies, I was disgusted at the idea that she did not know her own history. It really was. And this is more common than it is uncommon. And it's up to us to change that by teaching people what we've learned.
A while ago you mentioned when they made marijuana illegal and how, I believe it was Dr. Woodward who represented the AMA. He went into committee and said, you can't make this marijuana illegal. It's cannabis. Cannabis has a lot of medical uses. Of course, the heads of that committee went to the floor of Congress and lied and said the American Medical Association supported marijuana prohibition back in 1937. But if you look at the transcript, the Speaker of the House then, as he was for over 30 years, was Sam Rayburn of Bonham, Texas. Sam Rayburn grew hemp back on his farm in Bonham, Texas. So he introduced and said, this is a bill about something called marijuana. So he didn't even know he was prohibiting a crop that he grew back home. But that was the whole purpose of renaming it marijuana, because nobody knew what that was.
So the congressman was voting to turn himself into a criminal. He didn't even realize it.
Yeah. Not just the congressman. He was the Speaker of the House of Representatives. In fact, he was Speaker longer than any other person in U.S. history. But again, it's all about money and power. And we've got to re-educate people about the history of cannabis. And I know you were talking about Ben Dronkers and the Hemp and Cannabis Museum in Barcelona and Amsterdam. I think Casper mentioned something, like there's a marijuana leaf on a statue in Barcelona.
Yeah,
you know about that?
If you go to Barcelona at the end of the Rambla, there is a statue that's very high with Columbus standing at the top of it pointing to the New World. And very suspiciously, or not, depending on how you look at it, we adorn statues with plants all the time. But it looks like, you'll love this, Paul, hemp stalk going up the side of the statue, and at the top of the hemp stalk looks like a big 7-pointed hemp leaf. And anybody listening to this can go right on Google and search for high-resolution images of the statue of Columbus in Barcelona and see for yourself, and you tell me what you think those patterns of plant leaves look when you consider what plant was responsible for so much of that ship. Ben Dronkers is a wonderful man that purchased the first hemp museum in the 80s from Ed Rosenthal and another gentleman and renovated it into a world-class facility, expanded it in the 90s when his interest in environmental hemp grew, and created the Hemp Gallery down the street. So it's two museums. And then went even further in the 90s and purchased a 500-year-old former palace of the Spanish Revolutionary Guard. When France was occupying Spain, this palace was used by the revolutionary freedom fighters for Spain. And it's really an amazing place of history when you think of the struggles that we're going through and, you know, the occupation we're all dealing with the government's intrusion in our lives. You know, when we can't grow flowers, it's just amazing. I mean, people listening might not know it, but I served 5 years in federal prison because after California changed their law, I became one of the first people they arrested for growing medical marijuana. And it astounded me that, you know, they will lock up somebody that has no criminal record and grew flowers with people that murder and create mayhem and the worst and think it's okay. And when they treat us like we're criminals for simply really growing flowers and being a farmer, the worst assault on our liberty that's possible. You know, when you listen to people in America talking about, you know, losing their gun rights, it's silly because they've already lost their right to grow a flower. And honestly, if you were ever going to stand up for the sake of anything's liberty, it would have to be for the sake of a flower to grow, because that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about hemp farming and we're talking about medical marijuana and cannabis use as adults. It's really just about growing flowers and not being afraid to grow the seeds that the earth has given you in light of the government holding a gun to your head and saying, be afraid of me, be very afraid of me.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Hello, I'm your host, Casper Leach, and we are pounding the tom-toms today, getting a message out, and it's going to be our way of saluting the indigenous Indians all around the world. Today's segment is called The Cannabis Story, in Our Past, in Our Future, and on the program today, we will be having visitors from around the world. Don Land will be joining us today, as well one of his buddies known as Guy Dumas. They have instigated a wonderful approach to bringing industrial hemp into the global tribal community that will help the tribal community around the world lead the way in the industrial hemp revolution. And that is one of the messages that they hope to bring today when they sit down and share their thoughts and conversations with us. And we will be covering the many aspects of industrial hemp, but we're doing so with a new slant. We're discussing it from the point of view where it is legal to grow now. We'll be covering that here in just a minute. So the things that we talk about as solutions to problems are actually solutions that can be put into place. And there has been an awful lot that has happened on the political front, not just here in America, but all around the world pertaining to this plant. The United Nations is now taking a good look at ending prohibition on all drugs, but as well as especially marijuana, i.e. industrial hemp. Many countries are using industrial hemp already as part of their economic base. And December 2014, something really remarkable happened, and we woke up on the 15th to news reports from all around the world discussing this news event out of Washington, D.C. From the AP Newswire, Native American tribes can make their own marijuana laws. The U.S. Justice Department said Thursday Indian tribes can grow and sell marijuana on their lands as long as they follow the same federal conditions laid out for the states that have legalized the drug. Oregon U.S. Attorney Amanda Marshall said Thursday the announcement addresses questions raised by tribes about how legalization of pot in states like Oregon, Washington, and Colorado would apply to Indian lands. Only 3 tribes have expressed interest in growing and selling marijuana, said Marshall, who co-chaired a group that developed the policy. One is in California, one is in Washington State, and the other one is in the Midwest. Marshall warned the announcement was not a green light to tribal authorities and that marijuana is still illegal under federal law. The U.S. government's prosecution priorities involve pot-related gang activity, violence, sales to kids, and trafficking continue. Problems could arise for tribes with lands in states that still outlaw marijuana due to the likelihood that marijuana could be transported or sold outside tribal boundaries. Seattle attorney Anthony Broadman, whose firm represents tribal governments throughout the West, said the announcement represents a potential for an enormous economic development tool here. If tribes can balance all the potential social issues, it could be a really huge opportunity.
It's Sunday, December 14th, 2014. This is Matt Lamb, your host, and welcome to the Marijuana Minute. In a sweeping spending bill that passed the Senate on Saturday night, the federal government sends some mixed messages on medicinal marijuana, but most would agree it's a big win for weed. The Huffington Post is reporting that the omnibus legislation to fund the federal government also includes an amendment that prohibits the Department of Justice from using funds to go after state legal medicinal cannabis programs. The Medical Marijuana Protections Amendment was proposed in May by Democratic Representative Sam Farr from California and protects marijuana businesses in 23 states where medicinal marijuana is legal and 11 more states where CBD oil extracts are now legal. Representative Farr was very optimistic, stating that the federal government will finally respect the decisions of medicinal marijuana states. The same legislation also holds a measure, however, blocking the newly passed marijuana law approved by over 70% of the voters in the District of Columbia, where Congress has the power to override local laws. Although some members of Congress believe loopholes may allow the measure to proceed, the message is clear. Congress does not want legal marijuana at its own doorstep. This has been the Marijuana Minute. Until next time, stay high.
Hello and welcome to FourCornersTV.com. I'm Laura Schweizer, and this is the local roundup. Native American reservations have been a haven for gamblers, but now these sovereign nations might have hit the jackpot. The Justice Department decided they'll no longer prosecute federal laws regulating the growing or selling of marijuana on reservations. Different than gambling laws, it isn't state dependent, meaning that tribal governments make the dope decisions, whether the state they're located in has legalized pot or not. Out of the 326 federally recognized reservations, only 3 have stated their interest in legalization. But how they tax it is a different story.
In 1942, after hundreds of years of persecution and abuse, the U.S. government legally defined the Federal Indian Trust Responsibility. It was a pivotal time in history when the U.S. government, building upon previous court rulings, officially took moral responsibility for the plight of Native Americans. Since then, there have been many other acts intended to improve conditions for indigenous populations. The question is, what has the U.S. done, and is it working? For the most part, Native Americans have access to free medical care. There are also scholarships and loans specifically for them and unique financial opportunities. In the 1980s, the Supreme Court ruled that in states where some form of gambling is legal, be it something minimal like bingo or horse racing, tribes in those states can operate casino-like halls and gaming activities on their reservations. According to the National Indian Gaming Commission, casinos now gross about $28 billion annually and have stimulated job creation and population growth. The U.S. Justice Department is also now allowing some tribes to grow and sell marijuana. These policies are intended to help combat poverty and other socioeconomic problems. But as of yet, there is little proof that they're working. In 2012, those who identified exclusively as Native American or Alaska Native had a poverty rate of almost 30%. and Native American and Alaska Natives are more at risk for substance abuse, gang involvement, mental health issues, child victimization, and suicide. Before Obamacare, many free clinics for Native Americans did not provide a full array of services, and 30% of Native Americans remained uninsured. Casinos also have a spotty record. According to the Native American Rights Fund, gaming on Indian reservations has not appreciably lowered the high levels of poverty on Indian lands nationwide. Some even argue that casinos have created a false perception that Native American communities are getting rich, which can be detrimental to fundraising efforts for much-needed relief services and community development projects. Tribal leaders are also hesitant about the new policies surrounding the growth and sale of marijuana. According to one representative, Indian tribes have been decimated by drug use. Tribal regulations of pot are going to have to dovetail with tribal values, making sure marijuana isn't a scourge like alcohol or tobacco. If you'd like to learn more about the plight of Native American tribes or indigenous people around the world, check out this video on D News. Thank you for watching Test Tube Daily. New videos 6 days a week. Please subscribe.
This is Colin O'Keefe here with an in-person episode of LXBN TV. The Department of Justice announced earlier this week that would allow Native American tribes to establish their own rules and regulations around the legality of marijuana use. Joining me now to explain exactly what they did and what that could mean going forward is attorney Lael Echohawk. She's with Garvey Schubert Bayer. We are here in their offices, and she is author on their blog as well, and that is Smoke Signals. Lael, first off, let's start kind of with the basics. What exactly has the federal government done here? What have they laid out?
Basically, the federal government did what they've done for states, and they're sort of letting states decide whether or not they want to legalize marijuana within their state. There's a number of requirements, but I think most importantly, the memo that was released last Thursday, it's actually written in October, but that was released last Thursday, it says two things. Number one, it says that the federal government can still enforce federal marijuana laws. And number two, that while tribes can begin thinking about whether or not they want to legalize, that consultation has to occur with the individual districts. And, that's sort of one of the problems that I see going forward, because this consultation that's going to happen has to be done on a district-by-district basis.
Absolutely. And then that's a nice segue there. As you mentioned, one of the negatives, many people have seen this news come down. They say this is going to be very big. This could be huge. What are your thoughts on how big this could be? And then with that, what are some of the positives? But then, as you mentioned, what are the negatives that could come with this as well? Yeah.
So I agree that this actually could be huge if tribes decide to enter into this industry. There's a lot of opportunity. Again, you have to follow through with the requirements of robust regulatory scheme. I think first and foremost, tribes need to sit down and internally decide whether or not, based on the issues that they've dealt with, social issues. I mean, some of these large land-based tribes have actually, in the past couple of years, we've lobbied Congress for the passage of the Tribal Law and Order Act, the Violence Against Women Act, because we've seen drug dealers come out into Indian country and grow and sell, and then come back because there was sort of this safe haven that we've tried to address those things, and we certainly have through these various pieces of legislation. But those issues we need to internally work through, and then we need to figure out how that enforcement's going to look. There are counties, there are towns, there are states, the Department of Justice. There are all these agencies, law enforcement agencies that tribes are going to need to talk to and figure out some sort of comprehensive enforcement scheme that's going to be much more sophisticated, I think, than what we have currently. So once you jump through that hurdle, then tribes are going to need to take a look at their own internal codes and ordinances, regulations, and decide how you're going to make that. If you decide that you want to enter into the industry, then how are those codes and regulations and policies all going to intersect? And if not, then tribes need to be aggressive about passing ordinances and laws that say that the tribe is not going to legalize marijuana, because otherwise you end up in a situation here, for example, in Washington State, where you've got tribes that, like the Yakama Nation, which has been in the news, that say absolutely not, no marijuana on their land. But then, you cross the street and you can be in Washington State where it is legal. And so, tribes are going to have to be very clear about the position that they take. But there is opportunity in terms of production that growing, processing, actually turning into medicinal or recreational marijuana products, and then retailing, whether or not tribes want to retail. There is an opportunity, for example, here in Washington State, where a tribe that allows smoking in the casino could conceivably allow an area to consume marijuana products, which in Washington State is not legal to consume marijuana products publicly. So there's sort of that opportunity. There is opportunity, but the nuances are very, very complicated. We're working on them here at Garvey Schubert Bear. We're going to have a webinar in January where we sort of go through in much more detail than our little conversation here. So I'm going to be posting about that on the blog probably next week and see how it goes.
Cool. We'll have to keep an eye out for it. Like you mentioned, it presents an abundance of opportunity, but all sorts of gray areas can pop up. I saw on a state level, one state is suing another state that it borders because it's having to step up its law enforcement activity. So there's opportunity, but there's a lot of gray areas as well. Once again, that was Lael Echohawk. If you want to see more of her insight, it is on her blog, Smoke Signals, and of course she is with Garvey Schubert Bear, where we are today. Thanks for talking with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Colin.
Joining me on the program today are two hard-working activists. We have a gentleman from Taiwan, and we've got one from Canada. We have Don Land here from Taiwan.
Good morning from the Kingdom of Thailand, everybody.
And also joining us is Guy Dumas, and I want to say thank you, Guy, for being here today. And isn't your nation the Northern Cree?
Okay, not necessarily. However, I come from that territory. When I get an opportunity to explain where I come from, I'll jump in at that time, but that's close to it.
Okay, but aren't you part of an organization that has a lot of other Indian tribes as part of that organization as well?
Okay, no, actually, I come from, if I could say my name, first of all, my name is not Guy Dumas. That's an imposed name by the Canadian government or the federal government. And when they were handing out names, that just happened to be the one that I got. And my real name is Nimheto Penese, and I come from the Wapascasani tribe. And the Wapascasani tribe is located in what we call Fiction, Manitoba, northern Manitoba, where again the government have called the Cree territory what we would call Ideno. So there's as you know, with the English language, sometimes it doesn't really describe what the real story is when it comes to tribal peoples throughout Turtle Island here.
Okay, sounds like you've got an awful lot there to share with our audience, and we'll make it a point to get back to you here in just a minute. But let's kick off with Don and see what Don's up to. Now, Don, what are you doing with industrial hemp there in Thailand?
Well, what happened was about 15 years ago, the Kingdom of Thailand started a hemp project under the Queen's Circuit Botanical Garden to study the efficacy of cannabis, not only medicinally, but also for commercial use, in relation to the constitutional rights that the Hmong tribe here in Thailand has due to its history with cannabis. And what they did is they did a 10-year project to scientifically quantify the value-added verticals of what cannabis can represent to the tribe for economic purposes. And when the project ended, it went into the next phase of study, taking the academic results of that study, and my task has been to quantify it in the economic world. So we created Thai Cannabis Corporation to take the studies and try to find the most value-added aspects of the plant that would benefit the Hmong nations and the tribes.
Okay, so that's been going on for 15 years.
Yes.
Well, how long have you been involved with it?
I got involved almost as soon as I arrived here in Thailand, and got directly involved with the Queen's Circuit Botanical Garden, with the directorship, and I gave them some input as a consultant and advisor, taking the project from an academic study to a commercialization study. And since then, we've gone into a second phase of projects where here in the next 2 weeks, I go back to Queen Sirikit Botanical Garden and to the Highland Research and Development Institute to present our final plans on how to integrate cannabis into the economy for the Hmong tribes. The thing that makes my situation a little bit different is that I do not involve myself in domestic issues or domestic causes for cannabis use for the average population of the Kingdom of Thailand or the government of Thailand. What we do is we look at the fact that trying to do something commercialization for a tribe, if the money is only coming from a local area, then all you're doing is circulating money within that region, and it's not actually causing an increase in economic benefit. So what we did is we took the tribal perspective and we reached out to other tribes through Turtle Island and with Guy to create an international causality to import-export that would cause an increase in benefit economically.
Now, the tribes in North America are considered sovereign nations and are able to set their own rules, regulations, and police their own property. And I know that makes it a whole different ball game when it comes to dealing with the rest of the country who is under the federal jurisdiction of the United States government. How are you working with the North American community?
The thing is that, yes, while our tribes do have different rights, we still have to be in compliance with the United Nations. And we've been working to achieve parity with the United Nations UNDRIP Treaty. That is the Indigenous Rights Treaty with the United Nations. I got involved because I come from the Oregon coast, and I'm a half-breed. I am part of a native tribe on the Oregon coast. And back in the 70s, we were in defiance of prohibition and trying to eradicate poverty within our own tribe. So we realized that growing cannabis illegally was something that would help alleviate poverty for our elderly and within our nations. And coming to Thailand was quite a surprise to me to find that they were already working on trying to end prohibition when everybody in the world is in the belief that Thailand is a very hard country in regards to cannabis. So when I got involved with this, it's because I am tribal myself, and it was just a natural fit.
Well, before we get any further into this great conversation, I think it would be very good to also hear a little bit more from Guy and say hello to him.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on this program today.
I know one of the reasons why you were excited about being part of this is that you wanted to share with people how it was that you discovered other aspects of the plant besides the fact that you could just smoke it, right?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, I was just, as I mentioned, I was just totally ignorant about cannabis not too long ago. In fact, back in my younger days, in my late teens, early 20s, I did smoke a lot of cannabis and things like that. But after a certain point of living this lifestyle, what I call the traditional lifestyle, I totally gave it up because it's not part of what our cultural practices are. And so I've stayed away from it for many years until every time I would hear someone talk about cannabis, or I would smell it on people's clothes or on their breath or hair, you know, I'd say, yeah, they're smoking up, you know, and things like that, and all these different ideas about people that use cannabis and things like that, you know, all the misinformation and miseducation, misinformation that's been fed to me through the media, through newspaper, and through other people that are just as ignorant, if not more ignorant than I was. And yeah, you know, like I was just totally like out there somewhere, not really knowing anything about cannabis and totally ignorant about its many uses and advantages and all of that. So, and I suddenly got a realization or an awakening, I should say, towards cannabis when it really hit home to me. And of course, this is a personal story that I'm sharing for the first time. And it really hit home to me when my brother passed away. He had 4-stage cancer, and in his last few months, he was in extreme pain, and it just bothered me that I was observing all his pain that he was going through. And almost every hour, he was taking these synthetic painkillers that were probably harming him more than helping him. But nevertheless, it was dulling his pain enough so that he could carry on a normal basis. And but he would tell me that he was in extreme pain, but he didn't want to show it. His body was used to it, his mind was used to it. And so one day I said, "Hey, you know what? I've been talking to different people about medical cannabis. Would you mind trying that? Because I mean, you know, it ain't going to hurt you if you try it." And of course, he's of the same mind as I was. In our traditional ways, it's not part of our culture here. It is part of the Western indigenous peoples' cultures there, but not part of the central indigenous peoples here. We weren't gifted with that medicine, and so part of our teachings is not to use medicines that have not been gifted to us in our traditional ways. So he was very adamant and very strong on that as well. And so as time went on, a couple of weeks go by, and I could see that he was just deteriorating even further and further. And again, I introduced it to him, and of course, by this time, I'm up to speed as much as I could about cannabis and its uses and stuff like that. And so I talked to him about it a little bit more, and I said, you know, there's a lot of people out there that use cannabis to manage their pain. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's probably better for you than these crap synthetic drugs that you're taking. And in fact, if it were up to me, I'd probably prescribe this cannabis to you rather than all these 38, 42 pills that you're taking a day. And I can just imagine what it's doing to your intestines and your stomach and everything else. And so he says this was about 3 weeks prior to him moving on to the spirit world. He says, so he agreed. Okay, he said, okay, I'll give it a try. And he was very reluctant, but yet he said, okay, I'll give it a try. And so I made some phone calls to some people that I knew that were in the industry, specifically in the Washington State area there. And so I made a few phone calls, and I said, what do I need to get this up here? And by the time I was going through all the loopholes to get that done, my brother had already passed away. And so to me, as I think about that story, I know that my brother is not an isolated case. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that experience so much pain in their life that if this other natural drug or medicine, I should say, this natural medicine would help them cope with daily life with less pain, you know, I would support that in a heartbeat. And I know that a few of my relatives, even right now, I can think of 3 or 4 of them that are in extreme pain right now, and they know that I'm in this industry, but yet I know that they're shy to ask me about its uses and about its benefits, and I know that at some point I'm going to have to ask them if they entertain the idea of using cannabis to manage their pain. But yes, I was very ignorant of the fact about cannabis, both the medical marijuana as well as the hemp, and I knew very little about it. In fact, the only thing that I knew about hemp was I heard years ago that you could make shirts out of it, and I just couldn't wrap my mind around how you could make a shirt out of hemp. So I was just like totally ignorant, man, like, you know, and so And so that's my story about being totally ignorant up to a couple of years ago. And of course, I've been educating myself as quickly and as fast as I can, because it's such a vital industry for so many things that are going on right now. And I'm happy to be involved in the industry, even though I have told people that I don't pass any judgment against anyone that uses any kind of cannabis whatsoever. And in fact, jokingly, I have even said that if I walk into a building and there's a lot of smoke going on, I don't know how long I'll be going to hold my breath, but I'm sure by the time I go to the other side of the room there, I'll probably be a little bit, I'll have a little buzz going. But, because you can't stop breathing, right? You got to keep breathing.
Yeah, and my perspective on this is I've spent most of my adult life involved with cannabis in one degree or another, and from Oregon Country Fair to the barter fairs to the Hemp Fest to all that. And 30 years ago, we were ostracized, completely socially excluded because of our relationship to cannabis. And I developed an attitude that I call myself a green man. What I mean by that is that the social ostracization that we've experienced is almost as if it's racism. And when you look at it from that perspective of racism, you start to understand that we have done something to ourselves where we have put ourselves in a place of victimization because of prohibition that is not healthy for us. We need to get away from this idea of victimization and ostracization from social inclusion and redevelop ourselves that we are not victims. We are not a second-class citizen or some kind of aberration, that we do deserve to have recreational use by showing that we are inclusive into the economy, into the society, and into uplifting our countries and our peoples, rather than being like I was when I was in my 20s, a traveling hippie that went around and just had fun. I think that these are some of the things that need to be addressed if we're going to talk about recreational use, is social responsibility.
I do want to make it a point to thank one of our sponsors, KDK Distributors, for being nice enough to give us a grant to keep us loud, proud, and strong. And I want to remind people out there that if you go to the homepage of timeforhemp.com, you will find a little video about a free vaporizer that Kelly is giving away to the medical marijuana community. And Kelly asked if he could be part of what we're doing, at least long enough to make our audience aware that if they need a free medical vaporizer, that Kelly and his team are more than happy to make that happen. Isn't that right, Kelly?
You bet. Guy, I don't know, you were talking about that you've quit smoking cigarettes, which is awesome, 15 years ago, and cannabis. I guess you're not smoking cannabis. But if you've ever tried the alternative vaporization, it's extremely, very, very different than smoking. When you smoke, you're combusting. When you're vaporizing, you've eliminated combustion. So when you eliminate the combustion, you eliminate the well over 20 carcinogens that are created by just the combustion alone. So from a health perspective, it's extremely healthier than burning, whether it be in your pipe, in your bong, or rolling it in a joint. When you vaporize, it's much healthier way to consume cannabis. So what I've done, and I started my business 15 years ago with a quality vaporizer, and the first thing I thought was it would be beneficial to the medical community, to people who were consuming cannabis as medicine or for whatever their ailment may be. And a lot of these people were elderly, and a lot of them had never smoked in their entire lives. So just the idea alone of smoking cannabis was not really very appealing to them. So I knew that a quality vaporizer was an awesome device for the medical community. So I went there first. And you know what? I found out that I was right, that a lot of people in the medical community could really benefit with vaporization. What I also found out when I was there is that a lot of these people are on assisted income, on a pension, on a disability pension, on some welfare, whatever the case may be. They simply could never, ever afford a vaporizer. As a matter of fact, for a lot of them, if you know some people, Guy, I don't know how they afford to pay rent and buy food, let alone cannabis as medicine, and then think about getting a quality vaporizer is just definitely not in the equation. So I made it a point that once we became successful in the industry, or if we became successful, that we would give back, and that's where we would give back. So for several years now, we here at KDK have teamed up with the guys at Herbal Air, and we give away a Herbal Air 2.2 once every month to a medical patient, and they can be anywhere in the world. We have shipped them quite some odd locations. So wherever you are, you may be listening. If you're a medical patient and you really could use a vaporizer, it's really, really simple. All you have to do is send me an email to Kelly, Kelly, at kdkwholesale.ca. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and of course an address where we can send a free vaporizer to you if you're lucky enough to be drawn from the hat of eligible entrants. And all we ask is that you simply be a medical patient. In other words, you use cannabis as a medicine, and you could never afford a quality vaporizer. Those are the only two requirements. And I'm sure you know some people, Guy, as well as I know I do, and I know Casper does, and certainly anybody who is listening right now, either you're a patient yourself, or certainly you know somebody that could benefit from a free vaporizer. So certainly let them know about the program, because I know we love to hear from you guys, and we especially love to hear about the stories we get back from some of the medical patients, because there's another benefit that a lot of people are not aware. Because it's more efficient than combustion, and you recover more of the active ingredient, you actually need to use less cannabis to attain the same thing. So it's not only healthier for the medical patient, it's also easier on the pocketbook. So it's a huge, huge advantage to them. So hopefully we hear from some of you in the near future, because we have a lot of fun giving away free vaporizers.
And on behalf of the medical marijuana movement, Kelly, thank you so much for doing that. That is such a gracious offer that you and your team do. And we also want to let people know that the winners are listed. The name of the person drawn is listed in joint conversations each month. So make it a point to get a copy and tune in and let your friends know about this wonderful act of love.
Thank you, Kelly. Certainly appreciate the story that you just told there. And yes, I know of many, many, many people that could use this vaporizer to replace the existing pharmaceuticals that they use. And that's just, that just boils my blood, man. I mean, all this stuff that we've been fed about this information, about what's good for us and what we need and what will help us and all of that. I mean, it's just kind of okay. So before I go too deep down that rabbit hole, I just wanted to mention something about the tribe that I represent. The tribe that I represent is called Wapascasine, and it's located in northern Manitoba Fiction, and it's in a place called, it's in the Praying River, High Rock, Granville Lake area, Fiction, and that's where the Wapascasine tribe comes from, and that's where I come from. And, and most of the people up there are very traditional in their own ways, and yet at the same time have to adapt to the many changes that our world offers. And there's people like myself that have wandered around Mother Earth on Turtle Island here, experiencing the many different cultures and many different ways of life itself. And the Wapascussinit tribe is probably one of the more advanced tribes on Turtle Island, is willing to look at different options, different ideas, to get the tribal members out of the box, as we say, because there's two laws of the land: law of the land 1, law of the land 2. Within the law of the land 1 is where it talks about Indians or Indios, and law of the land 2 talks about persons or domestic law. And most of the things that happen within Canada as a corporation is within the law of the land 2, which is domestic. And if we go across the invisible line to the United States, which is another corporation itself, it still operates within the law of the land 2 and still within the corporations. And so, and I'm leading up to the idea that we've been looking at all the things that are happening at the United Nations level regarding cannabis, and it's labeled in many different ways. And the Wapascussinit tribe, as I mentioned, is a lot more advanced and progressive in terms of engaging the world itself. We have a relationship with the Hmong tribe in Thailand, and we're establishing other relationship with other tribes in Australia, New Zealand, as well as out in Africa. And we also have a good relationship with our brothers down in the United States fiction. There's a lot of tribal communities there that are not part of the corporate tribal system, not the way that they're encased within the Indian Reorganization Act in the United States fiction, or the Indian Act here in Canada fiction. And so as a Wapascussinit tribe, we certainly like the idea that that we can determine who we would like to engage in different trade and commerce, who we'd like to associate with. We don't need to ask for approval or a rubber stamp or an okay, or these are the rules you need to follow. We use our common sense. We know what's right. We don't need to be told by the government what's right and what's wrong. We can do that perfectly fine. We did that for thousands of years prior to the governments arriving here on Turtle Island, prior to any corporate type of culture arriving here on Turtle Island. We're doing perfectly fine. And so we don't need governments, corporate governments, telling us that this is the rules, these are the legislations, these are the laws that you need to abide by. Sure, we're going to respect them. Sure, we recognize them, because we know that there's other cultures that live on Turtle Island that need those rules and regulations and those things that they have to follow. So we respect them. We're not totally discounting them. We know that they have their place. But when it comes to the indigenous peoples like the Wapascussinit tribe, we have our own ways of doing things, and we don't need anyone to interfere in our way of life any longer. It's been over a couple of 100 years now, and aren't things supposed to be good? Aren't things supposed to be well in Indian country? Take a look at Indian country, at the poverty rate, at the unemployment, at the poverty, at the violence, at the sickness, and all that crap that happens. And they're trying to tell us that Canada is the most happiest place in the world. In fact, there was a study released not too long ago that Canada was placed as the 5th country in the world that's the happiest place in the world. To me, that's just a bunch of bleep, bleep, bleep. I totally disagree with that study.
Well, Don, I must say, it makes for an interesting observation that the indigenous Indian tribes could end up being the leaders in the industrial hemp world. I know that you've got an agreement with North American tribes as well. What types of materials and products are you hoping to bring to market?
Well, we're looking at many different things, mostly food and energy and other value-added verticals to cannabis. But it's not only cannabis that we are working on. Cannabis is the doorway or the gateway to a much broader spectrum of trade, like coffee and other goods and services that Thailand offers through its education system and our ability to have year-round produce and fruit to support the North American tribes. And same thing with the North American tribes to supply Thailand with different goods and services that are wanted and desired down here as well.
How does hemp open the door to other commodities for the Indian nations?
Well, how it helps to open the door is that Canada, the government of Canada and the government of the United States has trade sanctions and barriers in place against countries because of prohibition. And once we lift this prohibition of this plant in exchange of all the different verticals that we're looking at for food, cosmetics, energy, seed trade, and all these other things, all the other things that we're having difficulties in supplying the tribes with becomes less of a difficulty for us. So by the time we actually are able to overcome the cannabis trade sanctions by being in compliance with the United Nations UNDRIP treaty, it's going to open up the door to a lot more trade with all the North American tribes on a two-way street.
I've had the chance to see your neck of the woods on YouTube and news reports, and your scenery is beautiful. There's a lot of plants down there. You've got a fantastic environment to grow beautiful crops. And I understand that you've got a large piece of land, too, that you work as a farm and have farm animals and intend to grow crops and are growing crops.
Yes, we've developed a permaculture farm here, according to King Bhumipol's self-sustainable plan and new theory. And what I've done is I've taken King Bhumipol's new theory of self-sustainability and integrated Queen Circuit's plan from the Hemp project as the energy part of the plan. And by integrating the two plans together, we not only have permaculture self-sustainability, but we actually go beyond that and into being a benefit.
Okay, now you've got a big benefit by having a tropical environment where you have one season, basically 12 months out of the year, unlike other parts of the world, like in North America, where we have all 4 seasons throughout the year. And that benefit plays into your hands pretty nicely, doesn't it?
Well, in polyculture farming, our photo period here is year-round. We have a stable photo period of 12-12, which means that for medical use, we have to actually do supplemental lighting. However, for field use, or what we consider to be field cannabis, we don't concern to what prohibitionists call hemp. We've gotten away from that and have gone with land-raised strains that we identify as field cannabis. Through the project, we've learned that we can actually have 4 crops a year in a rotating basis on the same land. But because we want to have one fallow period, we've decided on only having 3 crops in rotation per year. So we can outproduce North America or anywhere north of 30 degrees north latitude, actually 20 degrees north latitude, 3-1.
Now, I understand there are still a lot of hurdles to overcome, but once you get this into production, where you're going from seed to plant to product, you're going to have raw material and you're going to be producing industrial materials as well. How do you plan on distribution of the industrial hemp material and products that will be generated?
Well, that's something that we're in negotiation phase. Right now, we're addressing the issue of being in compliance with the United Nations UNDRIP treaty. And once we've gotten that compliance, then we'll be looking at supplying the tribes with everything from viable seed to food seed to all the vertical added benefits that we can put together. The thing that we are looking at in support of helping the tribes in North America is that because of the Queen Circuit Botanical Garden study, we've generated several different universities here who have studied cannabis sciences, we have doctorates, we have master's degrees, and we have universities and institutes in support, which means that we can invite Guy and other gentlemen like himself from other tribes down here for formal education to produce degrees and to set up factories and to have support on an industrial scale.
Do you have any specific products in mind that you think would be great for taking to market as you open up this new industry? There's, of course, the clothing market and the food market, the cosmetic market, and now the housing market, where you can have hempcrete and use it for making thick walls and making a strong roof. So there's a variety of avenues to explore. Have you decided any?
Yeah, building materials is something that we're looking at for sure. We're looking at capturing some of the United Nations contracts for disaster relief in that regard. As far as cloth and things like that, we're not interested in competition with India and China. That would be not very beneficial at this point. But we are looking at collateral relationships with other organizations and companies like Hemp Flax, as an example, to put in factories for composites and other polymers and oils, and really actually getting a very good market share in a lot of different aspects. Our primary thing over here is that I have to be a respondent. So if Guy puts in an order for, let's say, oil for cosmetic use, then that order is something I can respond to, so that we are creating benefit for the Hmong tribes here. And that's the guiding principle that I have, is that my representation of the Hmong here, the tribes here, they have to receive some form of benefit. So that's where we're looking at.
Oh, okay. Somehow I was under the impression that you guys were going to be focusing on the cosmetic industry. Maybe it was Guy who said that to me. Is that correct, Guy?
Well, yes, that's one of the things that we're doing, plus a whole bunch of other verticals as well. And first of all, I'd like to say thanks for Don for setting the stage there and all the things that he had mentioned, the background information to this dialogue that we've been having about what his challenge or / opportunity is in Thailand, and what we face here in what's considered to be North America or Turtle Island. And so as we began to talk about this, one of the things that Don did mention was the poverty situation that most of the First Nation, Aboriginal, Native American communities face throughout Turtle Island. And it's no secret that still a lot of the communities, a lot of the tribal communities live in third world type conditions when we have such rich countries that are benefiting from the resources of Mother Earth here. And the people, the poorest of poorest are the tribal peoples throughout Turtle Island here, as well as what we have come to refer to as Elephant Island. Elephant Island is where Don Land is located. So when he talks about the Hmong tribe actually resides on what we refer to as Elephant Island. And nevertheless, just to stay focused on what Don is talking about here with his challenge / opportunity that he has with the Highland Regional Development Institute, as well as the Queen Circuit Botanic Garden project there, and also with the Hmong tribe there, and all the things that he's doing there. And speaking of this idea about international commerce and trade, it's high time that we have that between tribes, and I'm very, very looking forward to working with the Hmong tribe, and that's our first relationship that's going to be established, and this is going to pave the way for other tribes that can join us in this international commerce and trade. And so,
and And that's where Michael Krawitz comes in, where he can really help move this thing forward with his position in relationship with the United Nations. According to the United Nations treaties, we need to have non-government organizations act as intermediaries between tribes. So creating the intertribal trade organization and the tribal commerce economy, we are now prepared to present to the United Nations, and we're hoping that we can talk Michael into assisting that.
Just by happen chance, I have Michael sitting right here with me, and he does have something he'd like to share at this point in the conversation.
You there, Michael?
Yes. Actually, I've got something I want to share with y'all I think will really kind of feel good. Right now, the UN is talking about development. As a matter of fact, the big milestone coming up is 2019, which is the end of a certain period of time under the Millennium Development Goals, where they're going to be looking into the, I guess, their success or failure on that level. And I just wanted to share with you something that the United Nations Development Program put into the mix. This is their statement that they gave to the United Nations Drug Control Office about drugs as we come into the UNGAS. They said, the criminalization of indigenous traditional practices done without consultation of indigenous communities raises a number of human rights and development concerns. The ban on traditional uses of coca, opium, and cannabis was passed at a time when scant attention was given to cultural and indigenous rights and before the adoption of key international instruments and relevant jurisprudence protecting the right of all indigenous peoples to be free and prior informed consent relating to issues that affect them, and to maintain traditional, religious, and medicinal practices, and to own, develop, control, and use of the real property and resources. Criminalization of drugs used for traditional and religious purposes likewise contradicts human rights protections for the traditional and religious use of controlled drugs. So I just wanted to share that. That language was really, it meant a lot to me. Hopefully you'll you'll feel the same way.
I'm very glad that you are aware of that language. It is very pertinent to us all, because in a way, the cannabis community that I grew up with is tribal in nature. All of us have a sense of tribalness in relation to this work that we do with cannabis. And if children can be adopted according to the second law of the land, like in the United States or Canada, tribes can adopt us as well. So this work that we're doing, we can adopt each other into each of our tribes. Isn't that right, Guy?
Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't take a paper or a pencil to do that. All it takes is the blessings of the grandmothers, the mothers, the wives, the sisters, the aunties. That's all it takes.
Wow. So I'd like everyone to understand that this call out that we're making to you is, we would really like to see that the direction of this work that we're doing in seeking compliance with the United Nations, that we maintain this as a family. We believe that those of us that fight and work in this field, whether it's Casper or Dr. Malamede or others, that we remember that we did this and we started from this in a tribal ideal from the heart. And we don't want to lose sight of that.
Well, I also get the impression that one of your primary focuses is a seed crop or a food crop that you intend to let the plants grow to flower and then produce seeds so that you can utilize the oil that is produced from them. Is that correct?
Well, I think the thing that we need to understand first is that where Guy is right now up in northern Canada, they only have about 118 days maximum photo period. They have a very difficult time taking cannabis all the way to seed. And they also have a hard time having food stores and other food because of the shortness of their photo period.
In that tropical environment, Don, you should be able to get 3 seed crops a year, right?
Well, no, you got to target your crops according to the marketplace. In regards to seed crops, the number one thing that is going to be a challenge for people, whether here or the United States or anywhere else, is understanding that if you don't have a plan, what I call planned ruins, you're going to create a problem for yourself. Because if you, like here in Thailand, we have monsoons and tropical storms and crop failures. We got to plan the expansion of this industry according to planned ruins or crop failures. And if you have a crop failure because of disease or natural disaster, what are you going to do in replacing that seed and to start another crop? Right. We have got to have international trade of seed and a seed bank that is reliable and dependable to respond to these disasters. To stay in the running when you approach a contract like we will be doing with the United Nations.
Okay, now I know some tribes are a little stressed out about the concept of smoking medical marijuana, let alone smoking recreational marijuana. So, Don, how, from your point of view, how does medical marijuana fit into all this?
Over a decade ago, the Kingdom of Thailand recognized that the Hmong tribes and the tribes here in Thailand were the poorest of the poor economically. And what happened was that the king, King Bhumipol, exerted his position and his resources to develop a scientific theory called the New Theory. And I encourage people to look it up. It's quite fantastic when you fully understand the implications of the King Bhumipol New Theory in regards to permaculture, economy, and identity. And during the process of development of this scientific principle of the New Theory, he asked the Queen, his wife, to start a project called OTOP. And I also suggest people look that up online, OTOP. One tamboon, one product. And during the process of developing the OTOP Royal Project, the Queen created 2 institutes and to study scientifically of all the different variables available agriculturally, of all the known different food, medicines, herbs, and everything that's available to the tribes, to quantify it scientifically and economically. During that project, I had the privilege of getting involved in the Queen Circuit Hemp Project. And it was then that I realized that what I was looking at was a socio-economic permaculture revolution, that when you insert the hemp project into the King's New Theory, what you have is you have a permaculture economic design that highlights cannabis, or in particular hemp, as the economic engine. The closing argument for the theory is exports and imports. And since the tribe has United Nations recognition, what we decided to do was to develop the commercialization aspect of Thai Cannabis Corporation to be inclusive of the King's New Theory, not just the hemp side. So what happened is we took all this material and we started joining tribes together, and I started sharing this with my tribes back in the United States. And you're starting to see the impact of this. Now we've reached a critical mass where the total number of tribes globally wanting to join in on this new economic revolution in modeling King Bhumipol's New Theory in conjunction with Queen Sirikit's Hemp Project has reached a point to where it has excited the tribal peoples to the point where we are now petitioning the United Nations to receive preferential nation status for disaster relief contracts and other contracts that the United Nations has, that through UNDRIP we should be able to acquire first. And that's where Michael comes in helping us with solidify this growing relationship with all the different tribal peoples that wish to participate.
And does this also include medical cannabis?
Yes, it does. It does include medical cannabis. But medical cannabis is something that, due to the war on drugs and prohibition over the last 40 years, it has affected the continuity of 3 generations. Right. So what we need to do is we need to address this from a socioeconomic perspective, from the lowest threat. And the lowest threat for us is acknowledging hemp as a food, as an energy source, as a commodity, and a lot of different things, and approach the medical side through social programs and through awareness and through professionalism, rather than the wild, wild west or the coffee shops of Amsterdam.
It's sad and in many ways amazing how decades of misinformation nearly destroyed this plant, nearly wiped it off the face of the earth, a plant that provides for us so many creature comforts and so many needs for our spirit and our body and our souls. It's amazing that we still have it around, and because of today's information, it seems like finally people are learning again the truth about how important this plant is.
Well, you're dealing with generational prejudices here, and that's one of the difficulties that this industry is going to have. Is we got to recognize that if you're going for the gold mine of trying to be the king of medical providers, you're dealing with a very self-centered, very small, highly competitive market. But if you back up and you look at this from a perspective of having a foundation of economics, where tribes are importing and exporting and building factories to develop verticals like the power bar, the hemp-based power bar for disaster relief, or the Simlac milk or ice cream or things like this. When you look at all the different verticals that can be built, the one shared commonality problem is enough, that there be enough feedstock for all the different verticals that can develop out of this. And when you take a look at providers, cultivators in the northern latitudes, they only have so many days of photo period. Same thing with Australia. So by working together intertribally, we can have a commodity exchange that we know that if I can't be producing seed in October, November, December, January up in Canada, then my tribe up there knows that they can access from Australia, they can access from us, and we can interdevelop each other's needs to cover those different blank spots within the cultivation cycle.
Now, I would imagine that you have a particular strain or two that you use in your climate for producing more seed. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. The thing about that is, and that's rather a contentious point right now, that during the hemp project here in Thailand, they identified indigenous Thai landrace strains. And when I say that from a tribal perspective that is irrespective of the known borders right now. Mm-hmm. So there's over 10 different varieties of landrace strain that have been identified here, that are some are considered feral or wild. And what we're looking at doing is we're looking at taking these other high-yielding varieties like down there in Australia and other varieties that have been developed through these many years but have a genetic problem of inbreeding. And we want to breed them back to the landrace strain and identify or create our own strain from the landrace strains, so that these strains belong to the tribes that join with us here. There's a great big hole in the genetic library for cannabis and hemp globally in the tropical region, and that's one of the things that we're working on right now is developing out that library and catching up with the Northwest, as an example. So one of the things that we're looking at is how to do epigenetic work to make it so that we can do seed production down here to provide, like, for instance, the North Canadian tribes with seed variety that will work up there for them, for planting, for their photo period, as an example. We have the institutes, and we have the technology, and we have the universities, and we've got the laboratories, all of that. So the tribes that are just coming into this, they don't need to reinvent the wheel. They don't need to start new institutes or start from scratch. They just jump in with us and carry on.
Now, it seems to me that it's hard to get the United Nations to move on anything rather quickly.
Actually, I don't agree with that per se. What it is that United Nations has a standard that they have to maintain, and it's our obligation to approach that standard. And once you understand how the system works and you approach or rise up to it, then it becomes rather more amiable and more workable for us to seek their guidance. Like these different programs, the drug program and the disaster relief program and these other programs, they have economic social development projects and full funding for all these different projects. And here's something that I encourage folks to take a look at. When we do finally end prohibition, it needs to be recognized that the United Nations is going to be in with that as well. And they are already making overtures of fulfilling needs that hemp and the work that others are doing can approach and get these contracts. When we think about ending prohibition, we need to step back and look at and take ourselves personally out of the equation and look at what it's going to do in relationship to the United Nations and approach getting some of these different projects and funding from that organization.
All right, now, Don, it seems like you and Guy have an awful lot of support from the tribal community. Now, am I misconstruing that, or are there a lot of people who are fighting you on this and who are against it?
Not much, no. I mean, what's happening here in Thailand now is that they're changing some of the rules of drug interdiction here in the Southeast Asian area, of doing what's necessary, of combating smuggling and mafia and illicit trafficking and things like that. And that is something that is actually needed to open up the legitimate people and the legitimate market that needs to be maintained in a dignified and honorable manner. So this approach that we are doing has been slow. It's taken me 5 years to get to this point. But it's the right way. It's what needs to be done to bring it into the fold of recognition within society. So as far as recreational use, that's not something that I deal with because that's a domestic issue. And there are other things that other people can bring to this to help educate people later. But right now, we got to quantify this and how it's going to affect society step by step. Perhaps I should bring in a social perspective on this. I was going around to a lot of different grand monks in each of the different provinces through Thailand, getting presenting to these grand monks and to the Grand Monk of Thailand himself about the work that the Queen was doing with the Hemp Project and the work that we're trying to do in recognizing the medical use of cannabis as well. And when I made my presentation, of course, there was a lot of different, prohibitionist ideas and a lot of things going around. But by the time I got done explaining the efficacy of cannabis medicine, the monks would always come back and say, does it reduce human suffering? That was their only question. Does it reduce human suffering? And when the answer came back that yes, it does, that it's up to doctors and up to patients to say, yes, it cures or it doesn't cure. But when you look at it from a perspective, does it reduce human suffering? The answer is yes. So now the Buddhist clergy here and the Buddhist ideal here of Ayurvedic medicine of reducing human suffering, it's wide open. There is no resistance.
Well, I have a resistance, and it's a resistance to the clock, but no matter how hard I try to resist it, I can't fight the fact that it keeps right on ticking. So, gentlemen, I want to say thank you for being part of our broadcast. And as we say here, time for hemp is like a good joint. It's always best when you share it with your friends.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent.
Y'all a little bit about a plant I know that can save the world. It grows long and tall and has flowers that can make your mind swirl. It's a funky plant with a fiber that is resistant to rain and mold. It's the strongest plant fiber known to man, the best rope you'll ever hold. Well, the pioneers covered up the wagon trains with a canvas made of hemp. And Washington and Jefferson grew it on their farms and said to make the most of it. The first stars and stripes were sewn on hemp, the first Constitution too. This is around the world for food, fiber, oil, medicine, and fuel. And if we get some seeds, we won't have no need for any other oil. We can make paints and inks or run our car. We'll go back next season, it'll fix the soil. The most nutritious seed we can put in our mouth with omega-6 and 3. We can feed the world with the tree of life and live sustainably. But if we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to breathe. We'll grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the God's plant grown wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa.
Dope can also be made into oil or rope. Some people say you smoke it and you feel fantastic, but from hemp you can make an alternative to plastic, made from plants, not petroleum, you see, so it won't still be around in 4003. It can biodegrade, which means there'll be less pollution. Just another reason for a hemp revolution.
The flowers of the female hemp plant make the best medicines on earth. Helps cancer and AIDS patients eat their food. Helps those with depression overcome the blues. Glaucoma, epilepsy, nausea, insomnia, stress, neurosis, psychosis, pain, PMS. All the studies have been done and all the doctors agree, but they can't make money off this plant, you see, because it's free. It grows from a seed, wild and free like we ought to be. You know the future is grown in our own backyards. If we cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to be. We'll grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the God's plan grown wild and free, living the way that we ought to be. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa. In the mid-1930s, it was the billion-dollar crop. With the invention of the quarter kit, they could produce it non-stop. But then a smear campaign with Mexicans to blame started making people think it'll make your brain go pop. Yeah, since then it's never stopped. It ain't like getting high for paint and crack rock. Time to bring it back to nature, time to bring back some life. Let the farmers do their job, stop giving them strife. Renewable resources, life-giving forces. Panels for your cars and saddles for your horses. DuPont, Monsanto, making the wrong choices. Suicide genes, extinguishing our voices. Cutting down the trees, polluting the 7 seas. Leaving the fate of the planet to the corporate entities. Corrupt politics, warfare, disease. Now it's time to make a change, it's time to plant seeds.
Focus on nutrition, eat the oil seeds. It gives you all the protein you will ever need. You can make it in a sandwich with jelly or jam. Or make it in a soap or a lotion for your hands. You can make it into fuel, put it right in our cars. Then we won't need the oil and won't have to start wars. You can make it into paper, write as much as you please. Cause it grows like a weed and we won't have to cut trees. So put your faith in hemp, such a versatile plant. And don't let the government tell us we can't. Cause hemp can help us all in so many ways. And it doesn't mean that we will all be living in a daze. Versatility, sustainability, look at history. It ain't no mystery, hemp for victory.
If you cut down all the trees, we won't have nowhere to be. We grow fields of hemp instead. We can make our paper, build a house from it. It's the good God's plan, grow wild and free. Living the way that we are. Gonna leave my children a better world than my ancestors left me. Whoa, whoa. La 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 la. Whoa, whoa. So in this modern day and age, when we seem to lack spirituality, this one single plant can bring us back almost 10,000 years in history. To the Shiva, Piranhas, the Jesus, the Christ, to the Buddha, the pagans, the goddess, the light, to commune with all the animals, to roam with all the trees, to realize we gotta see, cause inside me, as the earth is a mother, we gotta take care of the earth, cause the earth is the mother that gives life birth, and we can heal all our relations with a single green plant, and we can start right now.
We got to legalize, we're gonna come alive, all the people who know what's up, gonna say what the heck we letting these suckers get away with it for. Come on and open the door, are you with me, are you with me, it's gonna take my organisms to shut the suckers down. We're not fooling around, but they're keeping us divided, opposite sided. What do we Americans do, we keep buying it, black and white, they're making us fight and still in the same racist hatred justifies violent relations. Gotta wake up and see, the real enemy is the powers that be, from the opposition scene. Wake up now to nature's creation, sacred herb can unite the nations. Gotta legalize the herb of adoration. All of this use is gonna heal the nation. Heal the nation. Heal the nation. Gonna heal the nation. Gonna heal the nation.
As I talk to the people from New York State, I realize the need for money to deal with this problem. I am glad that in this administration we have increased the amount of money for handling the problem of dangerous drugs sevenfold. It will be $600 million this year. More money will be needed in the future. I want to say, however, that despite our budget problems, to the extent money can help in meeting the problem of dangerous drugs, it will be available. This is one area where we cannot have budget cuts because we must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
Some silly song. Know what you'll say? You'll say I'm all gone. I've opened my mind to this little green seed. Could help us with pollution and the economy. And this little miracle God to ascend. It's got lots of names, so hey, let's call it hemp. It's the fastest natural resource the world's ever seen. It's got 77% cellulose. That's a lot more than trees, we say. So many uses, from textiles to tents. Build your house at a lot less expense. You can burn it as a fuel to say make electricity. It would be a lot nicer to the air that we breathe. We say top quality paper for the dollars you dream. Rubs up to medicines and the proteins we need. much is his money well spent? Lincoln himself writ his treaty on hemp. But you tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You say, yeah, that I'm too gone for you. So is a drug would like your cigarettes, your money and your coffee and those TV sets. Alcohol maybe is the one you should fear. It kills 100,000 of you every year. In 10,000 years, no one has died of a toke. What's not very nice is that CIA coke. I know what you say, it's the devil I'm from. Would you fuck me into office if I built you a bomb? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You say, yeah, that I'm too gone for you. Smuggings, rapists, killings for greed. But you'd lock me up just for growing a weed. Everyone knows that nothing makes sense. You can lie and cheat on the blind, but you cannot smoke hemp. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. You say, yeah, that I'm too gone for you. Won't you tell me I'm wrong? Tell me I'm wrong. You say, yeah, that I'm too gone for you.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network, the only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.